Hello, good evening. Thanks again for joining me here on our Sangha YouTube channel. Um, First of all, let's do Sancho. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you very much. All right, so welcome. I'm excited about tonight's talk. We have been spending the last couple of hours worth of videos, 4 now, discussing the science, the philosophy, the Buddhist view of the nature of the process of life. And it's easy to get stuck there. So I'm going to move on from that tonight. I'm going to assume that you have enough video and enough blah, blah, blah for me to be able to go and review it and research whatever you need to and at this point, in fact, I'm going to not enforce something, but I'm going to really, really plead with you on something. There are 3 treasures in Buddhism. The Buddha, obviously, the teaching, where would we be without that, and the Sangha. The Sangha is us. It's our community. It could be 2 people. It could be 2,000 people. It could be 2 million people. The point is that the Buddha recognized that although some of us have the study habits where we can be self-driven and do all our studying and learn a lot, even if you are a brilliant studier, self-teacher, you will not learn as quickly and you will not learn as diversely as you will with just one other person. So I bring that up for 2 reasons. If you're watching this video and you live in the Tupelo, Shannon area where the Kwoon is, please, 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 please make it a determination to just come here once or twice during our services or on Wednesday nights. I want to meet you. I want to know who you are. And so that's local and on the internet all over the world. Any question you have, and I speak French and I speak Spanish, so if you're not comfortable asking the question in English, ask it in another language, and I'll do my best either to respond in your language, or certainly I'll be inspired to either refer you to an extant video or create another video just to answer your question so that we can make this a living Sangha online. At some point, when I get comfortable enough to the technology and I have the setup in here, I'm going to set up Google, I forget what they're called, but they're live events on Google so that we can even do Gongyo together and then have a discussion. So anyway, I don't want to get off on that track, but I wanted to just establish that I need your comments on these videos, okay? To help us all out. All right, now, I don't think I need to recap everything we've talked about so far, except that I want to mention just a couple of quick things. Importance of Sangha, string theory. I brought up string theory. There's a lot of, if you study any kind of advanced mathematics in quantum or string theory, the parallels, the language is almost the same between Buddhism and modern science. And I think at some point, scientists are going to discover that what they've been searching for as far as the scientific proof of what life is and how it's made, they're going to find that they've answered the spiritual question at the same time. Buddha's already knows this. This is what we're talking about. We're just developing a better language to understand it. But here's the thing about Buddhism. We're talking. I kind of want to. I don't want to take the pressure off you. Not that I'm pressuring you, but Buddha, Siddhartha's whole mission was to relieve human suffering. So we're talking a lot about before how the process of life instantiate and how it comes to be, and how matter comes from energy, and how matter goes back into energy when we die. So there's no afterlife, there's no before life, there's just this process. And life, as you and I know it, is a human form, name, and condition. Okay? So Buddhism, even though there's all this talk that we go through about how the process works, we need to know that, I guess, to satiate our minds from doubt and wondering. But then now what we're going to do is I'm going to dive into noble truths, because now that you understand, hopefully deeply, how karma works, what karma is, it's just the process of life. Now that we're here and we understand, okay, here's the process of life, what do we do with it? How do we handle it? Why is it miserable? Why is it suffering? Why is it elation? Why is it all these things? So that's what we're going to start to talk about now. Buddhism is a very pragmatic thing. It's about simply developing our lives so that we have less and less an experience of suffering and more an experience of joy. And to be joyful all the time. Not bust over laughing, that's not joyful. That's, well, 1,000 other words, but it's a temporary thing. Joy, deeply felt joy, is a warm, kind of when you feel loved. It's this feeling that we've all felt in moments, but to feel like that all the time, wow, what a life that would be. We just want more of that, all right? And less of the why is life so hard business. And that's Buddhism. That's it. It's really that simple. So we're going to focus. When I think of stuff and I know I'm going to do these lectures, I quickly take notes because I don't want to forget stuff. But sometimes it's just repetitive, and I'm going to start relying on you more to put some questions in the bottom. Okay. One quick reminder about this life when we're human. There's a lot of questions about birth all the time and how that happens. And this speaks to the idea of things like a soul or some eternal bag of you, which we know we've talked ad nausea by now. Everything is impermanent. Everything. Any phenomena, energy, matter, habit, those are all things. Those are phenomena. They come from nomina and they go back into nomina. Okay, so there's no bag of you. You don't start with a bag. You don't end with a bag. All right, you develop along the way, and then whatever energies you've created are just subsumed and absorbed into the mass of ku, or amala consciousness. But here's the thing. Amala consciousness isn't just this quiescent energy, this other. Because you remember I started out all this talk by pointing out that the universe isn't a bubble. It isn't a bubble that expanded in something. It's an explosion of stuff that manifested within or amongst or in and through, like a drop of food coloring. Remember the example? Drop of food coloring in a big, huge pool of water maybe look very concentrated right when it begins, but it very quickly dissipates and goes out throughout the water. it's still a drop of food coloring, but it's so dispersed that if you were to look through this whole vast pool of water to find it, you wouldn't be able to. But yet, it is there. The reverse is true too. If you are like, if we are the drop of food coloring in this example, actually the universe is, the other stuff, the quiescent energy, the Amala consciousness, the dark energy, the dark matter, it's in us and through us. We hear things like, we're 60% water, but, remember water molecules, they're mostly space. All molecules atoms are mostly space. So all that space, that dark energy, that dark quiescent energy that we don't experience directly, it's most of us, in and through us all. The reason I bring this up is because, if you understand that the 12 Nidana chain of existence happens billions and billions of times before a human is instantiated, remember that process is ongoing all the time. And it's happening in you. It's happening in you when your DNA informs your marrow that you need more kidney cells. It's happening all the time. Now, that's an important thing to bring back up, because in birth, you are not just this comet of chain reactions that's looking for a place to land. You are an extant state of tendencies and conditions that's in everywhere in this quiescent energy, dark matter, dark energy that's going through us, that's happening. And when a man with his DNA and his karma, and a woman with her DNA and her karma mate, I know this sounds like the birds and the bees, but pay attention. When they mate, they are, the man and the woman are a living, changing environment. They are a universe in themselves. And my DNA, your DNA, is constantly being informed by new decisions that I'm making every moment of my life. I've read figures in Buddhist teachings of 180,000 decisions made in each moment of life. Well, those are causal chains. And those causal chains create something. They create a predilection or prejudice. They create an attitude. Buddhism is big on about attitude, because all of this circles around how you view life and yourself and the world around you. So it's really a science of attitude, how to adjust our minds to control that attitude into a benevolent state for ourselves and by extension, everything around us. So whatever I'm going through in my life at the moment that I impregnate a woman affects that beginning, that big bang, that causal chain. It's influenced by not only what I'm thinking, but what I'm hearing, what's on the news, the environment I'm in, because that's the conditions that are going to affect the tendencies that are affected by my tendencies, which are constantly evolving and changing and repeating, right? And she's doing the same thing. So those four sets of things, there's the mother-father DNA, right? The genealogy, the genes, the hormones, all of that. And there's the spiritual, which is really another name for something that hasn't quite instantiated yet. It's the conditions around which we exist. That's the spiritual. And so those two elements, the male and the females, also come into play. And in all of us, in the environment, are causal chains that are being attracted. Remember the attraction of similarness, of like magnets. like anything that has like-mindedness, consciousness, is attracted to the other. So there's this third entity that's forming around that whole mix, and it brings to bear its own causal chain to make a third DNA. If you check the DNA of a sibling, it's never exactly the same as either parent, but it has a lot of similarities to each one. And it has its own individual character. This is why. This is why there are actually three entities at that moment of birth, of instantiation of a pregnancy. And that's why to a Buddhist, human life started at that moment, because that's when all the tendencies are assembled, and now they're all working in unison within the conditions it's in, which are also affected by the pregnant mother, the environment she's in. We all know scientists study all this kind of stuff, and it sounds a little mystical, but from the standpoint of Buddhism, it's pretty obvious. So it's interesting to know that. I think it's important to understand that, because the baby that entity doesn't exist in and of itself with its own bag of circumstances. It's very much a melding of the tendencies of both parents and the environment that all three find themselves in, along with the conditions and the causal chains that happen to be in that quiescence, which is within and around all of us. So it's a complex formula, and it begins at that moment in human form, and almost like human form is like a stamp that says, okay, this is what you're working with, work with this. And it has an expiration. That's the tendencies it has, and you can modify those tendencies depending on the conditions you put around it. Was it born or instantiated during wartime, or a healthy country with good foods? All of these are conditions for that karmic chain tendencies, right? All right. So let's get to the noble truths, because I had to explain that, because in order to understand the first noble truth, you have to understand that by now it has to be obvious that there is just an unfathomable amount of desire built into every causal chain, combining and running through the 12 nidana. Even if you read each nidana without thinking about the multitudes of chains, just look at one chain from beginning to end. Desire, attraction, avarice, need for other is so, the causal chain is absolutely dependent upon it. And if you think about the billions and billions and billions of causal chains that have come together to make a human being, the amount of desire to be is so immense that the moment that rubber stamp is made, human, the trouble begins. Why is it trouble? Because when you finally get what you want, it's always a huge letdown. Because when you get what you want, you've never stopped to envision what having it would mean. And I'm using, that's a bit of social, vernacular. Careful what you want, right? But it's a popular saying amongst Buddhists, because we understand that the moment we instantiate, and this is in my notes too, but I'll just, let me read you some of my notes. All causal chains go through an evolution, right? They start with very subtle action, the motive force and the energy. I know I'm going to keep repeating this so you remember. Then there's a subtle tendency. As those accumulate, there's a tendency built in. The tendency joins the motive force and energy, and right away attractions begin, because as soon as there are tendencies and energy behind them, they look for a fit. That's just the way stuff works. Energy, matter. Subtle attractions, then the tendencies start to affect the actions. Then the attractions get stronger and stronger until the attractions realize that in order to go any further, they kind of have to perceive themselves. And this is when we start getting closer to the will of what you and I understand as human beings. Those attractions want to manifest, and that begins to sound, that's the formation of a will, a volition. And that volition has an attraction and a desire to instantiate. A strong will then looks to invite other causal chains to create consciousnesses. Mind you, it's a consciousness of its own. It comes from a consciousness. Now, that determinate will that says, I must manifest in order to have this consciousness, I have to have an object to be conscious of. In order to have an object to be conscious of, I must make an object to be conscious of, not least of which is the object with which I will be conscious of the object of conscious of. I love those. So, this is how consciousness arises. And again, read on the 12 Nidana and you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, when a baby's born, this is going to sound cliche, but when a baby is born, what does it do? The first thing it does. I know when my daughter was born, we did it in a dim room, so there weren't bright lights. We didn't smack the child. We did all that new agey stuff. And we didn't cut the umbilical cord. We put it in an amniotic bath, warm water, and we let the child work out taking its own breath and opening its eyes on its own. When Aaliyah, my daughter, did this, her eyes were seriously, the first moment of her eyes opening, we were this far away and we made eye contact. It blew my mind. Her eyes were just pupils. They were completely dilated. It was just big black round circles. But from that moment on, it really impressed upon me how this is what all children do. They wake up and they just are stunned at everything. And I'm thinking in their minds, knowing the nidana and the tremendous desire to instantiate, they must come out of the womb and go, look at all this stuff I made. It's all them. The hardest thing about raising a child is putting limits on what it thinks it can do. A child doesn't see any reason why it can't eat the furniture, or fly, or walk under tables. Just because its eyes stop here, it doesn't know it's got a bunch of meat above its eyes, and it runs into tables. How many 3-year-olds have big old lumps and cuts on their foreheads because they try to run under stuff, not perceiving that they have matter up here? It's funny, but it's so obvious that humans are born just big desire machines, and they so want to just bathe in everything that they think they've created and made. And they're not wrong. We have, with our collective consciousness, we have made this universe in a very real way. The problem is that our attraction train, our rhino of desire, is kind of unstoppable. And it's unsatiable. So the very conditions that provide us with the ability to manifest as a human being are torture to us. This is why the first noble truth is all life is suffering. All life. Because we'll never get what we think we deserve, because we think it's all ours. And we don't share. We don't like sharing because it's all mine. That's the first noble truth. And it's noble because it's inevitable. The process has it built in. To manifest as a human is to manifest a life of misery, of suffering. Yeah, I'm not saying you're not going to have good times and stuff, but I'm talking in general now. Life as a process ends up giving us a situation of suffering. We can never sate our desires. So we have our entire identity born in the womb. We have an identity because we have our DNA, we have our tendencies, we have our conditions. And the moment we come out of the womb, the conditions start to evolve quickly because now we have sensory overload and we are just wrestling with everything that we've made. And we want to kind of put the monkey back in the box, so to speak, and have it under our control. That is the human mind, not the Buddha mind. The Buddha mind's a mala consciousness. The human mind, the sixth and seventh consciousnesses, are built on top of our karmic chain mind, all of our tendencies and conditions, a big soupy footprint that we are, and constantly evolves and changes with all the thousands of decisions we make in each moment of our lives. But unfortunately, when we're young and growing, the predominant type of decision we make is based on ownership and having and controlling. And that is the definition of the ego mind. Now, I use a little example when I talk about the ego mind versus the Buddha mind. The Buddha mind knows all of this, understands the process. It begins it and it swallows it back up at the end. It is eternal. It knows. It's not surprised by anything. And it doesn't have any attractions. It just observes. Okay? And Buddhism is a science of observation, if nothing else. So, the Buddha mind is like this little jewel hanging in the middle of your head that knows, that isn't perturbed, knows all, watches this TV show that's called Your Life, right? And surrounding that jewel are infinitesimal little tiny monkeys. There's just billions of them. And all of them are screaming, me, mine, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. And they're all jumping around from branch to branch and doing what they don't even know what they're going to do next. And that is the cloud of the human mind that you and I are trying to navigate our lives with, while trying desperately to communicate with our Buddha mind, our sensible mind, our mind that doesn't. So the ego is suffering. And the very mechanism that raises the will to be results in the ego, the state of constant desire, right? We just went through that. So, the second noble truth is already built into the first one. The suffering, it's kind of a reminder, is caused by avarice, by this insatiable earthly desires. So we know that. And the third noble truth, also hardly worth mentioning, because all of this comes from the first noble truth, is that the only way to liberate our lives, our human lifetimes, from this suffering, this constant cycle, these moment after moment after moment of instantiating the desires to be, along with all of the desires of attraction and avarice and want and more, every single moment of life in Buddhism is like it's a cycle of birth and death. Because from this moment to the next, I'm having to transfer all of those same desires and thoughts and avarice and from my DNA to my spiritual awareness into the next moment. If I were to break that moment to moment connection, then I would no longer exist. I would be something else. Well, the reason we perceive ourselves as one lifetime is because we transfer a bucket load of those tendencies and conditions from one moment to the next. That's so strong, their will to be. But we change over time. We age, our hair color changes, our skin sags, stuff starts changing because not all of it keeps moving on. And some of it has had negative causes, so it starts to break down. Our goal, to our purpose, the fourth noble truth is the most important. The third noble truth, liberation from suffering, can be achieved by appeasing the ego, the avarice, the monkeys. So, to put it simply, if we can take control of the human mind with the awakening of the Amala consciousness, we have to develop a strong will again to intercede. We need a strong mind, and this in Chinese Buddhism, Indian Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, it's constantly referred to. Unfortunately, almost 90% of the translation of Asian scriptures or writings on the teachings of Buddha were great scholars, but they were all Western scholars, English scholars, and the like. And boy, in the West, we sure love our mystical words. And so you'll read all these things. I'm constantly going through rewriting these books because they use the word faith, and it's just not accurate. Faith isn't fact-based. Faith, by its very definition, is more of a wishing, desirous. The most concrete part about faith maybe would be to use the word trust in there. And I don't have that much of a problem with trust. But faith, this goes to another mystical, and maybe that's because I was raised Catholic. I don't know, but I've studied martial arts, and I've studied other Asian philosophies, and it became very clear to me that in most of Asia, the idea of the mind and the heart are one is something very not Western. And so when in ancient times the Asians spoke about a determined, strong mind, they talked about a heart and mind connection that was seriously dedicated with life, not just thought, because of the heart and mind together applying the force, the taiji of will, in order to manipulate the energy of life, chi, to manifest something. This is basic. This is Asia 101 in philosophy and in the cultures for thousands of years. So we need to develop that strong mind in the noble fourth noble truth. And the way the fourth noble truth says to do this, to awaken this strong mind and to battle the infinite monkeys of the ego, is to practice the Eightfold Path. This talk is about the Four Noble Truths, and I think that's plenty to study on those right now. The next talk, next Wednesday, I'll get into the Eightfold Path. I'll just touch on it now to give you something to attach the Four Noble Truths to. This is quite an oversimplification. Go figure. But the eight are right views, right thinking, right speech, right action, right way of life, right endeavor, right mindfulness, and right meditation. Now, I put in parentheses other ways to think about each one of these. Right views is about perception, correcting our perception. Right thinking is about cognition. How do we filter with our epistemology with our what our monkeys are after? How do we filter that function to see more correctly with our right views, perception, to help us with our speech and our thoughts to be calm and considered? Our way of life is consider all as one equal. Oops, what happened there? Did I lose you? Okay, I just lost my screen. Sorry about that. Anyway, so it's time to close out this talk. Anyway, we'll get into the Eightfold Path on the next video. Thank you so much. I urge you, please put some comments down here. Let me know you're listening. I love it when I hear from you. Even if you think I said something wrong, it'll make me think, why do you think that? And did I misstep? Did I misspeak? Not that I'm not capable of that. But more than ever, I so appreciate all of you. So let me know you're there. And even if you just, give me a thumbs up. I truly appreciate your listening to all of this. All right, Sancho. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait till next time. All right. Bye now.